All right, class, here's the unit exam 3 review. There wasn't one for week 2, and I apologize for not communicating this clear, but week 2, there really wasn't, in unit exam 2, there really wasn't concepts to go over that were commonly missed. They were kind of scattered here and there. So, but in this one here, there was a few concepts. It's going to look like, oh, maybe there wasn't that many, but the concepts that I'm presenting here were found in multiple questions and answers. Okay, so just bear with this. In social learning theory, when we're talking about aggression, people learn by watching others. They kind of see how others act out of aggression and what they can do to get away with it. They learn aggression through seeing maybe a brother, or sister, sibling, a parent, or somebody at school or somewhere. They look at it and see how is the individual acting, and not only that, but are they getting in trouble? Is there a payoff? If I act in a certain way, will I also get the same reaction back? So they kind of look and see if there's any consequences to the act by the individual that they're watching. And you see this all the time with stealing or other stuff outside of aggression, where if the individual notices that there's punishment, then most likely they won't partake in the behavior of aggression. But if there's some kind of payoff for them, for the individual, then they most likely will consider it. The other concept was realistic group conflict theory. It's a long term, and this one is really confusing. I see this missed a lot in past exams. And it's basically where prejudice, it arises out of competition of scarce resources. So there's two groups that, for example, that might be living in the same area who are looking for the same, who are sharing the same land or the same resources, and they want to get the one above the other. They want to dominate the other and dominate the resource that's in that area. South Africa came to mind. I did a huge research study in college about South Africa and the apartheid. If you ever want to see something very interesting, there's a video called Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And it's an interesting documentary of the trials that went through back then. So in South Africa, early 1900s, maybe late 1800s to about the mid 90s, there was separation between two groups, the Afrikaners, which were actually the British the British country that infiltrated South Africa, and the Black South Africans. And so there was diamond mines, there was land and political power that was won by the Afrikaners. And over time, because of the resources that were there, like the diamond mines and other things, other precious resources, the Afrikaners overtook, and there was a battle between the two, which ended up in Nelson Mandela. If you know anything about Nelson Mandela, being in prison for 30 years, and then upon release, not too much longer after that, was elected president of South Africa. And it's a real interesting story. So I can go on forever for it. I love this story. There's still a lot of drawbacks to the end, and they're having issues now because of it. Years later, after the apartheid dissipated and went away. So these are two groups fighting over scarce resources. Lamanites versus Nephites. I've used this one in previous examples, but think about them. Those two groups, they were definitely competing. If you look in the book of Ether, there was two groups competing. All the time, there's always at least two groups competing, and it seems like there's two groups competing here in this country right now of political power. So it's like there's scarce resources, and within each group, the perception is the other is bad, or we got to outdo the other in competition. Aversive stimulation is interesting. This wasn't seen a lot in the exam, but this is something that's always missed, like in maybe quizzes or like when I have discussions with students, they usually ask about this one. So I'll go ahead and throw this one in there. This was missed a few times. Basically, aversive stimulation is part of the arousal. So if you look in this chapter under arousal, you see aversive stimulation. So it was mentioned in there a couple times, not too much. But basically, there's something that triggers hostile aggression. So it's aversive stimulation is something that actually, when you compare it to frustration, like if research has shown that aversive stimulation triggers hostile aggression more so than frustration. So what is aversive stimulation? Well, it's something that an individual feels that's happened to them, like they were insulted, some physical pain, even depression has been seen as. So it's something that actually triggers an individual, feeling it inside, it triggers an individual to act out hostility of aggression. So that triggers you more than frustration would. So that's what aversive stimulation is. It's an arousal that gets someone to act hostile. There were several questions that were missed on groupthink. There were several that were actually answered correctly. So it was interesting. One of the ones that was missed was rationalization. So in groupthink, one of the concepts under groupthink is how groups will actually rationalize that they're correct. They'll rationalize their point. You see this with politics today. You see this if you go research any group, two groups are at each other, or one group against multiple groups, or even cliques that are people are within, even work groups. They rationalize that their way of doing things is the way, and that anybody within the group that thinks otherwise, they're wrong and they're not going to be open to it. So they're very close-minded. And they justify the decision and action of the group too as well. This is something that I've seen and I've read in businesses, organizations that actually end up where the business fails, or they have major drawbacks or setbacks. They rationalize. One of the things about being a smart business owner, because I was asked about this before, stuff that I read, and I taught when I meet a business owner, I pick their brain. I have friends that are business owners. You probably know business owners if you pick their brains. In order to be very successful, you have to be very humble and open-minded. Cannot have this mentality of this is the way we always do business. That's not going to do. You have to fluctuate. You have to be open-minded. I have a friend that did that with real estate. He did new home sales all the way up to 2005. And when he moved back down to Arizona, he switched to bank-owned, realizing that the industry is going to go to a bunch of foreclosures, and it did. And then he went from that, as he was selling bank-owned properties, he went that to what was called a flat fee, where no matter how much your house is worth, you pay a flat fee. And he jumped on that before anybody else. And he's been very successful with that business, which helped him open up a couple of other businesses. Not only does he have his own brokerage, but he ended up with an accounting firm, and now he's opened up a new brokerage under his new wife's business. So very open-minded, very, very open to new thoughts, not just sitting around waiting, not rationalizing. It's a good example of somebody that allows openness to help with success. Let's see here. The minority in the group. This was interesting. If you're asked how much does the minority of the group influence decision making, like if like in 12 Angry Men in that movie, if one juror says nope, he's innocent, and 11 says he's guilty, how much influence does the minority have in decision making? Believe it or not, more so than you think. The minority is the person who has a different viewpoint, is very consistent to their position, they influence others to rethink. That's a great challenge about minorities, and companies love that. As like I was saying, was rationalization. The minority in the group is actually very valuable. They want challenge. Companies want challenges. You should accept the challenge too, as well. If there's somebody in the group with a differing view, respect it. You don't have to agree with them, but respect it. And they get people to second guess original position, and a lot of times that's scary for people in the group. And you may have thought that yourself if you're in a group of people talking about everyday life situations, religion, spiritual stuff, or politics. There's probably times where you're sitting back thinking, wow, you know, should I really think the way I think? There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people get scared of that. So it opens your mind up to new things. So the minority can have major influence. Matter of fact, I've read it in this book and also in other research articles that the person who's a minority in the group has differing viewpoints is very influential and can get other people in the group to change their viewpoints. And it's happened more often than you would think. So that's it. That's all of the concepts here. So if you have any questions about these, just please let me know.